Hello, this is Charles Scoville, your Golden Harvest agronomist with your Focus Friday here on September the 8th. So it's been a great week of hitting a lot of field days out there, talking to farmers, finding out what's on their minds, and at the same time, picking up a lot of really good pork chops. That is probably one of the hazards of this job out here is field day season, but one that I'm willing to put up with. This week we want to talk about again looking at heat unit updates and where we're at. We had a great warm week, but what does that really mean? Also, want to talk a little bit about the observations I've seen in the field walking these field day plots, as well as a lot of the questions that I've been getting from different farmers along the way. And finally, found a kind of uncommon disease out in corn recently, something that we don't normally see in Michigan, but it's an interesting observation. We'll share that along the way. So, let's get started right with heat units here, and it was a great warm week. We did gain a little bit on the heat unit accumulations, but unfortunately, we have a cold week ahead of us here, relatively speaking. In fact, last week we were able to accumulate on the average about 23 heat units per day. And this next week, our average high is only going to be 64 degrees, which means doing the math, we're only going to accumulate about 7 heat units per day. It just takes so much longer to get to maturity when we have these cool weeks like this. But with that in mind, we're still going to be a couple of weeks in many cases behind the norm and not going to gain anything on that this next week. So we will want to, of course, start to think about harvest and planning accordingly. And quite honestly, probably going to have to dry a little bit more of this corn this year than what we normally like to do. As far as field day questions and observations, I would say that the corn that was planted around middle of May, which is a good chunk of corn in Michigan, a lot of that is starting to hit that initial dent. And so a couple weeks hopefully away from half milk line, and a couple weeks after that getting to our black layer, all certainly, hopefully before we get that first killing frost. Questions we're getting, though, as far as diseases out there, lots of questions around yellow soybeans and unfortunately brown soybeans, where we're seeing white mold probably as bad as I've seen in the 25 years that I've been doing this. And our conversations continue to be around that there are some varietal differences, and we have to do what we can on those fields that are more prone to white mold of different management of those fields. So dropping our populations, widening out those rows, considering the use of fungicides very specific to white mold protection, all are good things we can work on managing those fields in the future. Also, a lot of questions on sudden death out there, and again, that starts to lead back to the conversations about variety selection, as well as some of the seed care treatments that are very specific for sudden death out there. And then another interesting question I got here just earlier today actually was about soybean maturity. We're all looking to the fall and wondering, if I go from a, let's say, 2.1 to a 2.2 bean, a 1/10 of a day difference in maturity or group difference, what is that in real days as far as change in maturity? And talk to some folks on that. Seem to come to the conclusion that 1 to 2 days per tenth of a group of maturity difference is what we can expect in true maturity or harvestability differences on those beans. So it does not a lot of difference between a 2.0 and a 2.5, but 5 to 10 days, a week or so probably difference in a half a group of maturity at the end of the day. Some continued conversations about those Canadian smoke and the effects of that from earlier this year. And I truly think that early on that probably helped us out, especially through that really hot, dry conditions in the spring of the year and early summer. But at the same time, I'm sure that didn't help us in our heat unit accumulation and and probably help to get us where we're at today, being behind in those heat units. The good news is digging some of the corn roots out there, though, with that dry spring, those roots did have to go down to find moisture. And so that's really helped improve that standability and that ability to go out and mine those nutrients out of the soil. And so the crop is looking pretty good for that. The only exception to that, a little bit more recently, has been the scene of nitrogen deficiency more and more. And we can't run that much water through a soil profile that we've been doing here over the last month and not expect to lose a fair amount of that nitrogen. So for the most part, the good news is the ear leaf is pretty much untouched from that brown V-shaped lesion that's the indicator of nitrogen deficiency out there. But at the same time, it's working its way up the plant, and we've got a few weeks to go. So we might see a little bit of shortening the depth of some of those kernels or lightening the test rate a little on some of those kernels if we get that nitrogen deficiency way up on that plant closer to that ear leaf. So we'll keep an eye on that. But again, it's been a lot of great fun talking to farmers and just answering questions and looking at hybrids and varieties out there in these field days. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. The last thing here today to talk about is that uncommon disease, and it's actually a disease called eye spot. And so eye spot is something, if you look up into the canopy when you're out in the middle of the field there, you will see what looks like just little round spots. They tend to accumulate a little bit, but they're about an eighth to a 16th of an inch in diameter, and look like little water-soaked lesions almost. So they're yellow with kind of a halo around them, and they show up on those leaves in that upper part of that canopy. In fact, looking into that, it can actually show up as early as the vegetative V3 and V4 stages, and it'll develop kind of throughout the season. And it does like those cool but wet conditions, like a lot of those fungal pathogens out there. We see it more in continuous corn, more in no-till situations, and certainly some hybrids are more susceptible than others to that. So, if you do see a lot of this eye spots showing up in your field, we can manage through that in future years. We certainly want to use some crop rotation. Tillage can help to bury that because it is a disease rather that does live on that residue in the field. And finally, looking for hybrid selection to pick those hybrids that maybe are a little more tolerant to eye spot than others. But again, don't see it very often in Michigan, but it was unique to see it this past week, and we'll continue to keep our eye out there to see if it gets any worse. But again, a great week this week out there in the field, and if you got any questions, always give me a call. This is Charles Scoville, your Golden Harvest agronomist, with your Focus Friday.